I like this much better than shuffling around, Your Excellency this, Your Excellency that. This is much more real to me, so thank you. I'm going to tell you a simple story about some of my research in Amman, Jordan. And my questions were really about Western values, because as I interact with cultures, I travel quite a bit around the world, I would see this two-choice response. Either cultures capitulate to the West and absorb the values, or they run. They create a kind of digressive fundamental culture in response to it. And I was looking for what are the places that we would not necessarily see that are in between that, an engagement, not capitulating or not running. How does cultural engagement happen? What does it look like? Are there any models out there for Arab Muslim culture, which is the one that we tend to look at the most, especially from the United States perspective, as capitulating or running? And is there a role? Traditional Islamic philosophy and art, which is my main area of research, is that a way, is there a place there to help Arab Muslims engage culture? And so I found this little place called the Institute of Traditional Islamic Art and Architecture in Amman, Jordan, which is one of the only institutes of its kind in the world that trains Arab Muslim students in the traditional philosophy first, culture, and then the technique of traditional Islamic art. And I found some remarkable things happening there, a very deep level of cultural engagement. And I think when we talk about cultural diplomacy, there's a reality that happens when you actually see people doing it, when they're actually absorbing other values and engaging other values and discussing these things. So this won't be a policy, this won't be a UN level discussion, this would be something very much down the ground. I'm going to give you a really quick 6 points, and then I'm going to walk back through those points with quotes from the actual students. I did a number of visits there, stayed for several months both times. I had grants from Arab Muslim sources that allowed me to do my research. I did interviews for hours and hours. I did a survey. I cut all those slides out because I knew time would be tight. What I found was the students at this institute were first grounded in cultural history. And that's very important because many Arab Muslim students do not have a sense of their own culture. They feel like it's been hijacked by the West. They have an authoritative metaphysic in traditional Islam, and that gives them a firm foundation from which to work from. They have a ritual in the form of traditional art technique that is a place where they are doing their art, but as they're doing their art, it's this ritual that is tied back to this authoritative metaphysic, and it gives them a place to contemplate and think about values. As they were in this place of creating, they described, and I'll show you some quotes, very, very many times, an opportunity to think about their own system, their own values, their own lives, and the values of the West, and to try to understand how they can live in both these worlds. And then as artists, they would produce something new. And many of them described in many different ways, I don't want to be Arab, I don't want to be West, I want to be something else, a third thing. And they would describe this third thing as a combination of the two, the best of both worlds. And they were producing artifacts that represented this value. Some are film, some are carvings on desks. I'll show you a couple quick slides. This is more text than I usually put up on the slide. Forgive me. I usually have a 12-word rule, but I want you to have a sense of these quotes, and all the slides that you'll see are art made by these people at the Institute. People feel good because they learn something about their culture, about who they are. It's a source of empowerment for us and for Jordanians because it's ours. And this refers to my first point. The students first had to be grounded in their own history. They had a sense of not being anything. They understood that they were Arab, they understood they were Muslims, but they didn't know what that meant because they would go to McDonald's every day. So what does it mean to be an Arab Muslim? And many of them had never had, because another topic, the West has invested so heavily in the school system in the developing world, and they've done it on Western terms. And so the World Bank made a $200 million loan to the Jordanian government to develop higher education. And they set the loan up with criteria that were all purely Western criteria. So the loan was made, and the Jordanian government took it, but in order for the loan to be successful, it had to meet the criteria of the West, and it ignored the Arab Muslim values that were local. And so students grow up in a system that disconnects them from their own culture and forces another culture on them. So when they came to the Institute, the courses that were in cultural history were very, very important to them. The second point was the authoritative metaphysic. We are Arabs. We are Muslim people, and our fathers and grandfathers gave us a tradition that we have to go on. We don't have to copy the Western world. You see, in another time I did this presentation in the States, and people sometimes in the States are afraid of traditional Islam. But it can also be a grounding for people from which to act and which to understand, and which to give them a sense of security that they don't have to simply copy or embrace another value system, but they can stand firmly in something that they understand to be their own. The students then engage in these incredible techniques. They would take gold leaf and grind it by hand to powder. It would take hours. And it has to be perfect, because if it's too loose, it doesn't hold correctly on the paper. If it's too firm, the next layers of paint and ink don't stand out correctly. The lines don't look right. And so it has to be perfect. And they would go into these incredible times of focused work, of attention to detail. And this is a very spiritual process for them, and it's also a time for them to reflect. So this one student said, even the processes that we use in the art are a spiritual journey. You're sitting on the floor doing very